Kappa Dance.
What is up, my brothers? Welcome back to the ultimate lost game, Iceberg, where we explore some super obscure games that have been lost to time. Some have been found, some never even existed, and some still remain floating in the void. We're about 95 entries in and still have 939 lost games left to cover. This second tier is where things start to get wacky, they start to get goofy, and most of all, they start to get obscure. Like, Jesus Christ, I've only heard of like 2 of these games. Starting off tier 2, we have the Mario Takes America Sonic reskin. This one is quite the lost entry. In fact, it's a piece of lost media made for a piece of lost media. Nice. Last tier, we briefly went over a cancelled Philips CDI game called Mario Takes America. And no, it was not a game featuring Mario invading American soil. Rather, it was an educational game featuring Mario traveling to the United States to teach children about some classic American landmarks, such as Hollywood. Due to the game containing a metric load of FMV footage, the game ran like complete arsehole on the CDI, and Nintendo decided to put it to rest, execution style. I know what you're thinking, how will we ever know Mario's opinion on Skid Row? This entry refers to a proposed Sonic reskin for this game that was planned to be used as a backup. In the event that the devs weren't allowed to use Mario as the main character for some reason, they produced some sprites and FMV sequences utilizing Sonic the Hedgehog to be used instead. Mario, Sonic, same shit really. Apart from this tweet I found and a small mention on this now deleted Assembler Games thread, I couldn't find any of the content made for the reskin. Considering that when Mario Takes America was cancelled, all of the produced footage was repossessed by a Canadian bank, it would be safe to say that any content made for this reskin was repossessed as well. Unless someone contacts the bank and begs for this lost Mario edutainment game, these pieces of media are gone. Next, we have another piece of Canadian lost media, the Big Comfy Couch game. From the mid-90s to the mid-2000s, Canada aired the children's TV series The Big Comfy Couch, which featured a woman in clown makeup getting up to shenanigans with a toy doll while on a big comfy couch. The most sane Canadian television show. This shit looks so epic. In 2004, back when every single TV show needed a game for some reason, the huge, giant, reclining chairs' very own Xbox game began development. This planned, large, soft beanbag game was practically unheard of all the way up until 2011, when Unseen64 posted an article discussing the cancellation of the game. The article showed some epic pieces of gameplay, revealing that the game was a 3D platformer, and this image of a clown chick lying in a pool of blood. How quaint. Eventually, after being contacted by a lost media YouTuber, L Supersonic Q, a former Capcom employee that worked on the game named Chris Tang, confirmed the nature of the game and uploaded gameplay footage of it to YouTube. I don't know if it's because I've never heard of this show before, but this game looks goddamn terrifying. It looks like a creepypasta. If it hadn't been for the game's developer releasing footage, I would have said this shit was fake. Just look at that fucking clown thing, man. Pringles Never Shut was a flash game made to advertise Pringles in 2005. This game looks so epic, man. The Pringles flash game would let players interact with a cashier named Sanjeev at a 24-hour convenience store, where you could type your own messages and convince the sexy beast of a man to hand you 5 different Pringle cans, one of each flavor. They even made a promo video of Sanjeev walking around being all sexy and shit. Hell yeah. I took a look at this game's page on the Wayback Machine and what the fuck is this? Smoke, joint, poop, plop, turd. Those are some wild ass phrases, man. This game does seem to be lost. However, some people over on the Lost Media Wiki apparently got it working. The game kinda works, but there's no Sanjeev for some reason, and the game breaks when you type something. This is probably due to the missing XML file that I showed before, that I think is a list of all the keywords you can type, but I have no idea how to run the game with it. I have brain damage. This entry refers to the cancelled Fallout game that was unheard of for 10 goddamn years, Fallout 3 Extreme. Fallout 3 Extreme was a game that was in the planning stages during the year 2000, set to be the sequel to Fallout 2. The game would allow you to play in first or third person, kinda like Bethesda's Fallout, and revolved heavily around squad-based gameplay, letting the player switch to one of 4 squad members at any time, kinda similar to the Brotherhood of Steel game from 2001. The game would be very tactical, encouraging players to play in a strategic and high IQ fashion. Boring. The game's story was also a little whack, being the complete opposite of Fallout Tactics, in which the Brotherhood of Steel were planned to be the main force of evil, and the player's squad, known as the Cause, would work to reclaim Outpost under the Brotherhood's control. While well thought out, the game never progressed past its planning stages, because as soon as it was presented to Interplay, they rejected the shit out of it. We do thankfully have some sick concept art for the game, but other than that, anything else produced for it seems to be lost. Oof, another cancelled Fallout game. I guess you could say during development these games fell out. I swear to God, I'm gonna fuck. Fallout Online was yet another MMORPG, this time themed around the Fallout universe, that was cancelled in 2012. Developed by Interplay in a partnership with Masthead Studios, a Bulgarian company specializing in MMOs, Fallout Online would have essentially been Fallout 3, except online. If you've played a Fallout RP server on Gmod, which if you have, I'm so sorry for you, man. You get the idea. Oh shit, I forgot Fallout 76 existed. Never mind, that's probably the better comparison. But Kappa, are you fucking high? Didn't Bethesda own the Fallout IP during 2012? Yes, they did. But due to the good graces of my boy Todd Howard, when Bethesda bought the IP in 2007, they allowed Interplay to continue working on Fallout Online, but only if they could come up with $30 million to finance it. And they needed to start making it by April of 2000. Oh, cool. Easy enough. And they needed to release the game by 2013. Jesus Christ. Sounds quite peachy. But shit managed to hit the fan like it always does, and due to multiple counts of Interplay breaching this contract, Bethesda decided to sue them for trademark infringement. I would like to take back the thing I said about good graces. With Interplay having a tiny little debt of $2.5 million, and with the development of the game not being very far, they decided to settle out of court in 2012, leading to the game's cancellation. Like the last entry, there's quite a bit of concept art out there for the game, but any builds or prototypes they made are gone. Gangnam Style Massacre, what the fuck did I just say, refers to the mobile game of the same name created by Caroline Patron in 2012. Taking advantage of the popularity of Gangnam Style at the time, Jesus Christ, I can't believe that was 12 years ago, the game would have you play as an Asian schoolgirl with a bow and arrow, which you would use in order to shoot a vase resting on Gangnam Style Psy's head without hitting him. Quite epic, I must say. All was peachy for this game until later in the same year when a certain actual massacre, not a Gangnam Style one, took place in the US, forcing the developer to change the name to Gangnam Dance School and overhaul the game. Yikes, quite the bad timing, I gotta say. Due to the overhaul of the game, the original version prior to the update was no longer accessible and was lost, until the year 2022 when the user Computer Dude 77 found versions of the original game and uploaded them online. Tamagotchis, those little pieces of plastic with a screen that taught millions of children across the world how much it sucks to have a pet. I remember having one of these bad boys as a kid, but I think I ended up throwing it out because I got too scared of having such an intense commitment. The poor guy probably died of starvation. Back during the Tamagotchi craze, they made a website called Tamatown that allowed owners of a Tamagotchi to connect to and dick around and earn prizes for their pet. The site would award players after completing games with a 10-digit code that they could use to redeem an item for their physical Tamagotchi, although I guarantee you they just googled the codes and redeemed them all at once. Very cheeky. Eventually in 2013, the site's servers were shut down and all of its services became unavailable, leaving kids without access to their God-given right of playing Tamatown, meaning it's now lost. After a while, however, Bandai Namco gave up paying for the site's domain, and it was bought by a group of dedicated Tamagotchi fans that turned it into a fan site for all things Tamagotchi related. Yeah, That'll show them. Before we get to the next entry, I just want to quickly ask you to like this video and subscribe to my channel. It really helps me out. This image is no good. Gotta get them numbers up. Go get them up. We're so close to reaching our goal of 20k, and once we do, something very special and cool will happen. Trust me. Oh yeah, what was I saying? Charlie Brown's All-Stars is a cancelled baseball game based on the Charlie Brown special by the same name. This Charlie Brown baseball game was set to feature a whopping 70 playable Peanuts characters, in which players could play 4 different baseball-themed party games. Essentially Mario Party, but epic. The game was in development by Farsight Studios and was going to be published for the PS2 and PlayStation Portable in 2007, before it was suddenly cancelled. I couldn't find a definitive reason as to why it was cancelled, but according to a press release by Namco, the game wasn't even concept approved by Sony, so that could be a factor. In an interview with the developer of the game, Chris Klein says that the game was actually quite far into development, and a basic game of baseball would have been playable in the demo that they made. All I managed to find for the game was some screenshots and this footage of the game's menu, but other than that, it looks to be completely lost. This entry refers to another partially lost Breaking Bad Flash game, made in 2008 named Walt's Wisdom. This game was made a year before Walt's Warning, the other lost Breaking Bad game that I mentioned in the last tier. Similar to Walt's Warning, Walt's Wisdom would allow the player to submit the details of a loved one that they believed could use some advice from, Walter White. The advice would consist of Walter White telling the person submitted that they're wasting their time and they aren't living their life to the fullest, and that they should do something much cooler, like shoot drug dealers, run over drug dealers, poison small children. Well, he doesn't actually say any of that, but you get the gist. Like with Walt's Warning, this game was taken down in 2020 during the discontinuation of Adobe Flash. While the game itself is yet to be recovered, some footage and screenshots of it are available. Mario's Castle refers to a planned Mario title that was going to be made for the cancelled Nintendo handheld, Project Atlantis. If you don't know, like I didn't before researching this, Project Atlantis was a cancelled Game Boy console that was set to be released after the Game Boy Color in 1995. This is an image of it next to a DS Lite. God damn, is this thing massive. I wonder why they scrapped it. That's wild. Around the time this big boy was getting developed, a monthly magazine called Electronic Gaming Monthly spoke a bit about this new handheld, and even went as far as to say its first title was a new Mario game titled Mario's Castle. Apart from this one magazine article, there's zero mention of this game anywhere, which makes its existence quite dubious. If this game ever did exist, it was most likely cancelled along with the console it was being made for. The next entry after this talks about a sister game of this entry, so I'm just going to talk about the two together. Please don't revoke my Iceberg explaining license, I swear I won't do it again. Roly Poly's Nankorobi Yaoki and Roly Poly's World Tour were two Japanese edutainment games developed by an outside directors company that were released for PC in 1997. These games feature a group of strange-looking creature things that teach the player about super advanced topics humanity has yet to fully grasp, such as the alphabet and how to count to 10. Oh nice, what a sweet little edutainment game, right? Well, turns out this game was made by Osamu Sato. That's right, the guy who made LSD Dream Emulator made a kids edutainment game. I love this guy so much. Due to the nature of this creator, this game is super f***ing bizarre and surreal, but is also a masterpiece. This game did end up releasing in 1997 in Japan, but copies for it were very sparse. The games were thought to be lost as no one could find a single copy, and all the online shops that listed the game were out of stock. Praise the Lord that in 2019, the Reddit users Visual Menace and GoHold managed to find and purchase Nankorobi Yaoki and rip the game, and just recently, in 2023, Reddit users BakuDD and Potato Impact managed to find the other game, World Tour, and upload it online, and thank fuck for that. These games are perfect. This entry, I think, refers to the cancelled South Park game that was in development by Ubisoft and BuzzMonkey Software around 2005. The game was set to be released for PS2, Xbox, and GameCube, and would have contained an open-world South Park in which the player could play as one of the main four boys and get up to various shenanigans. This game essentially would have been The Simpsons Hit and Run, but South Park, allowing the player to roam around town, beating up innocent passerbys and completing missions. For unknown reasons, the game was scrapped and cancelled quite far into development, which is quite a shame. This game sounds and looks fucking sick. This game was thought to be entirely lost for quite a while when the YouTube channel Happy Console Gamer recovered some gameplay footage from the prototype, and while it is a bit broken, the general gist of the game could be seen. Additionally, a cutscene for the game managed to surface, showing Cartman in a mental hospital pretending to be disabled. Based.
That's okay. I'm feeling pretty good. I think I'll be having my treatment today.
We can do this the easy way, or we can do this the hard way.
Untie me, assholes!
Oh my god, that was so goddamn epic. This entry refers to the build for Stalker 2 that was leaked in 2011. This version of Stalker 2 was made within the X-Ray engine, the same engine used to make the original Stalker trilogy, and if you've ever played those games, you would be very aware of how the engine is pieced together with duct tape and runs on nothing but vodka and cigarettes. As you may put together from the recent release of Stalker 2, this version of the game was scrapped in favor of the Unreal Engine. Jesus Christ, thank God for that. From the leaked gameplay that was shown, it didn't look to be too far into development, aside from some maps that were built. As of now, this 2011 build doesn't seem to be lost and is available to be played. Kirby GNC, I think meaning Kirby GameCube Nintendo, was a cancelled Kirby game for the, you guessed it, Buster, the Nintendo GameCube. The game began development in 2000 after the development of Kirby 64 and was planned to be released sometime after Kirby Air Ride. It ended up getting announced in 2004 with a release date of 2005, which ended up getting delayed to 2006. Kinda like Kirby 64, this GameCube title would have had Kirby walking around in a 3D side-scroller on a quest to retrieve a star stolen by King DDD. Along with the story, it was apparently going to contain a 4-player co-op mode, as well as a versus mode. In fact, these extra modes are what ultimately led to the game's cancellation, as HAL Laboratory were finding it hard to design a game that was both single-player and multiplayer, and ultimately cancelled it around 2006. Many years later, in an interview with Satoru Iwata, it turned out that there were multiple builds for this game that were developed before they landed on a final idea. One of these builds was a full-on 3D platformer, and the other a full-on 2D platformer. One of these builds, most likely the 2D one, ended up being transferred to the Wii and getting developed as Kirby's Return to Dreamland. Additionally, a lot of the ideas and concepts from the first build ended up getting reused in Kirby Star Allies. These 3 versions of a Kirby GameCube game were all quite far into development, and besides from some development screenshots and E3 footage, they're super lost. Glover 2, baby! That's right, there's a fucking Glover 2! Never mind, it was cancelled. I'm going to drive my car into a tree. Glover 2 was a planned sequel to the industry-changing game Glover, a 1998 puzzle platformer where you walk around as a glove throwing a ball around. With its relative success, the devs planned to make a sequel, Glover 2, and it actually got pretty far into development until they scrapped it for an unknown reason. I guess it wasn't Glovery enough for the Glover Club. While it was cancelled, a few builds of it are available online, with about 60% of the game being complete. If you were going to tell me that this iceberg had 6 South Park entries, I would have either thought you were high or had a concussion. However, that turns out to be the case. The second out of 6 South Park entries refers to an unreleased South Park game made for the Game Boy Color in 1998 by Acclaim Entertainment. This 2D South Park platformer ended up getting fully developed. However, the creators of the show and Nintendo decided that considering the GBA was a console for kids and South Park was a show for adults, it wasn't a good fit, and the game was never released. The game was completely lost for a good while until 2018, when the user, Da Cool Dude, got into contact with the head developer of the game and posted the ROM for it online, and this game fucking rocks, man. Yeah, you know that game Ace Attorney? It's quite good, huh? But you know what would make it better? If all the characters were furries. Yakushan Seinhaneri was a furry fan game made for Ace Attorney in 2000 by Cheshire. The game was essentially just a standard Ace Attorney title, aside from the fact that the main cast were replaced with anthropomorphic animal counterparts. While this game was available for download when it came out in 2003, it mysteriously became unavailable and was believed to be lost forever. Despite this, the game managed to get found and uploaded again in 2021 by the user Kennick Fox. But at what cost? At what cost? Bomberman 3DS was a cancelled Bomberman 3DS game in development by Hudson Soft that was announced in 2011 and shown off at E3 the same year. The game was supposedly very similar to Bomberman 64, but for the 3DS. No way, I couldn't tell. It's unknown how far into development this game got, but judging by the screenshots we have of it, it's likely that it was quite far. Literally 1 month after the game got announced to the public, the game was fully cancelled due to Hudson Soft and Konami merging together. Aside from the E3 showcase and some screenshots, this game is completely lost. I'm sorry, Bomberman fans. Wait, no, you're telling me there's a cancelled Rabbids game? Oh god, why? Attack of the Killer Rabbids from Outer Space, god, that title is almost as long as my criminal record, was an FPS Rabbids game in development by Ubisoft in 2011. The game was set to be a spooky Rabbids game until Ubisoft decided to rebrand it to Killer Freaks from Outer Space. I guess seeing Rabbids killing people was not meant to be. This rebranded version was announced in 2011 and continued development until the devs decided the gameplay was quite frustrating and wasn't working very well for the Wii U. Due to these troubles, they ended up cancelling it and reworking what they had made into Zombie U. Apart from the E3 trailer and some screenshots, this early version of Zombie U remains lost. This entry refers to a lost early prototype of Super Mario Bros. 3 for the NES. While the game was still in development, a gaming magazine released a preview of an early prototype build that contained some content not present in the final game. For example, in the item bar at the bottom, the name of the world was replaced with the word Mario, as well as parabeetle enemies appearing in certain levels. Apart from the screenshots and video provided by Famimaga magazine, there's not much info out there about this build, and it's unknown if it's still out there. City 2000, also known as City in Trouble Year 2000, was a point-and-click adventure game for the MS-DOS made by Roller Game in 1993. This entry refers to the game's sequel, City 2000 Paris. This supposed sequel was mentioned in some CD-ROM game catalogs from the time, and was even teased on the box of City 2000. There was some speculation that some pre-release copies were provided to a store in Canada and were still out there somewhere, but that was just a bunch of hoopla. In 2021, one of the developers for the first game, John Stewart, revealed that the sequel was never made because, get this, it was an FMV game and features footage of people from the public. And according to the French law, the developers were required to get permission from every single person appearing in the game. God damn it, France. This entry refers to the unconfirmed SNES port of the NES game Action 52. If you haven't seen the Angry Video Game Nerds video on it, Action 52 is an NES game containing 52 unlicensed shovelware games, one of which being Cheetah-Men, the best game to ever grace this green earth. The game was quite infamous due to its very poor quality, as well as its whopping price tag of $200. I had no idea, but 2 years after releasing it in 1993, a Sega Genesis port was made for it for some reason, and following it, they supposedly planned to port it to the SNES as well. The 52 games were just that good, they needed to be shared across all the platforms. While the SNES port was mentioned on an advertising sheet back in the day, from what I can tell, the port never began development and does not exist. This entry refers to the lost early builds of the game Cuphead. In case you didn't know, Cuphead was actually announced all the way back in 2013 and ended up getting delayed a few times. During that time, the game was meant to be more of a boss rush type deal, meaning it would essentially be like the Cuphead we got, but without the hard as platforming levels that make me want to headbutt a screwdriver. These early builds of a boss rush only Cuphead contained a few different bosses that never appeared in the final release, some of which were reused in the DLC, as well well as some different weapons and charms. While some of this content can still be found within the files of the game and are able to be used in game by debugging, some still remains lost. Did you know that Doctor Who had an MMO RPG? Neither did I. Whatever it was, I'm sure it's better than whatever the this thing is. From 2012 to 2014, BBC BBC funny ran a Doctor Who online MMO RPG that allowed players to make their very own Doctor Who OC and help the Doctor complete some missions. When not helping David Tennant slaughter aliens, or whatever he does, you could explore a hub area and talk to other people online. The browser-based MMO ended up closing in 2014, mostly due to a lack of profit. Apparently, at one point, the URL for this game was bought by someone and used as a free Robux scam, which is really fucking funny, but as of now, it looks like it has been taken down. This entry refers to the very early prototype build of Among Us from November of 2017, and they really made Among Us in 7 months. From what I can find, the developers of the game have released a good amount of screenshots and gameplay for this early prototype, but the build itself isn't available online. The game Left 4 Dead 2 has quite a few free DLC levels, with each being a goddamn banger, except the passing. Me and the gang fucking hate the passing. Apart from those 4 DLC levels, Valve was apparently planning to make another one that was a tie-in with the movie The Cabin in the Woods. I mean, The Cabin in the Woods is a horror movie, and Left 4 Dead 2 is a horror game, but it's not really the first film I think of when playing Left 4 Dead 2. What about Dawn of the Dead, or even Day of the Dead, or Megalopolis? A Megalopolis DLC would be fucking epic. The film Cabin in the Woods was originally meant to be released back in 2010, but due to financial struggles, MGM, the film studio, filed bankruptcy and cancelled production, leading to Valve cancelling the DLC. Later, the next year, MGM would manage to pull themselves out of bankruptcy and sell the film to Lionsgate, who ended up getting the film made. The tie-in between Left 4 Dead and The Cabin in the Woods was two-way, meaning that the movie would also feature some content from Left 4 Dead. Despite Left 4 Dead 2 not getting another DLC, the movie was still released with a cameo of a witch, a tank, and a boomer from the game. Valve, I'm offering to pay $600 to play this DLC. If you're watching this, hit me up. Kirby 64 Kedoyon is the name of an early prototype build of the previously mentioned game Kirby 64. A year after the game was released in 2001, in an interview with one of the game's developers, Takashi Saito revealed a cartridge that contained an early prototype of the game to an interviewer. Labeled on the cartridge were the numbers 10/97, most likely meaning that it was a build of the game from October of 1997, 1 month into development. In the interview, Takashi also mentions the game was titled Kirby 64 Kedoyon at the time, and featured a fully 3D map, as opposed to the 2.5D perspective in the final version. They apparently kept developing this 3D version, but found it wasn't working and they could do better, leading them to switch it up to the game that was released. Aside from this interview with Takashi, there's no other mention of this prototype, and it's unknown if it's still out there or not. Remember Food Fight, that god-awful movie where Christopher Lloyd plays an insane person tweaking out on black tar heroin? For some reason that's unknown to the likes of man, the studio Cat Daddy Games, oh boy, started development of a tie-in game for the PS2, GameCube, Game Boy Advanced, Wii, and DS. Jesus Christ, were they making it for the fucking Samsung fridge as well? The game would let you play as 2 characters from the movie, the dog voiced by Charlie Sheen and the squirrel thing. It was gonna have a total of 26 levels, with some being platformer stages with the dog and the others being flying stages with the squirrel. Considering that the movie this game was based off was originally meant to release in 2003 and came out in 2012, and the fact that the game had to coincide with its release, it's no surprise why this game was cancelled in 2008. This masterpiece of gaming history was lost for quite a while until 2024, when the user Ziggy Cashmere got into contact with the co-founder of Cat Daddy Games, a man I wish to never meet. He was able to find and upload some files containing assets for the game and some design documents and footage, but other than that, no build has been found, which is quite a shame. This game looks 100 times better than the movie. I mean, that doesn't mean much though. This entry refers to a lost Flash game made for one of those fucking terrifying Gusher commercials, where a kid eats a Gusher and gets turned into a horrific abomination. This particular commercial was made to advertise a sweepstakes from the summer of 2005 titled Gushers Redo Your Room, which contained an online Flash game allowing users to make and design their own gooning room. The game would have the users create an account and enter a randomly assigned room within an apartment building, where they could enter codes found on the packets of Gusher products in order to unlock some sweet furniture. Although the sweepstakes would conclude later that year, the site somehow remained up until 2009, when it was suddenly taken down. Apart from the landing page of the game that's still accessible through the Wayback Machine and some of its files, it's completely lost. And according to the user Echoverse, who got into contact with General Mills, they no longer have the game either. Womp womp. This entry refers to an unconfirmed lost 5th episode for Doom. In 2015, the co-founder behind id Software, John Romero, decided to upload the original source files for Doom 1 and 2 online. Legend. This dump was pretty cool, but what people cared about was an interesting map file that was found, named e5m1.dwd. This particular map file contained the date March 1995, which happened to be just 1 month before the release of Ultimate Doom. Due to the naming of the mysterious map file, users of the forum proposed that it may have been a 5th episode for the first Doom that started development and got cancelled. Besides this map file provided by John Romero, there's no other evidence for the supposed 5th episode, and it's still unknown whether the map was a 5th episode in the first place. It's worth noting that a few years later, in 2019, John released his unofficial 5th Doom episode, Sigil, but it's unknown whether or not it has anything to do with this abandoned map. Shadow the Hedgehog teen-rated build refers to a lost early build of the 2005 game Shadow the Hedgehog. This game is already quite well known for being super edgy compared to the other games in the Sonic franchise, but it seems that the early builds for this game were even more edgier. That's right, bitch. Shadow the Hedgehog was originally going to say the N-word. This early build of Shadow the Hedgehog had a way darker tone, containing enemies that bled real-life red blood, and at one point it contained Sonic the Hedgehog saying the word piss. This super epic version of Shadow was given a teen rating by ESRB, which made Sega double back and make it more family friendly in order to gain a wider audience. A few different pieces of footage of this original version are available online, but the build itself is lost. I'm sorry, we'll never get to hear Sonic say the word piss. Assassin's Creed Lost Legacy was a 3DS game that was in development by Ubisoft back in 2010. This handheld Assassin's Creed game was announced to the public alongside Assassin's Creed Brotherhood at E3 in 2010 and was meant to contain a story about Ezio after the events of Brotherhood. Later the same year, Ubisoft decided to cancel its development and morphed what they had made for it into Assassin's Creed Revelations from 2011. With how Assassin's Creed Chronicles was on mobile, it was probably for the best that we missed out on another handheld game. Other than the logo for the game that was shown off at E3, no other content surrounding the game is available, and it's unknown how far it got into development. In 1997, Tiger Electronics, a company known for making awful handheld consoles, and the Furby, released their magnum opus, the Game.com. This chunky, oversized piece of plastic wasn't your standard handheld console. No, it was able to connect to the internet, hence its name, and even included a touchscreen, predating the Nintendo DS by 7 years. While the console wasn't the worst thing that they made, it was still quite awful, and it ended up failing due to it competing with another obscure gaming handheld, the Game Boy. During its lifespan, a total of 20 different games for it began development and were cancelled. It's all good though, this is the only one on the iceberg. One of these games was a port for, I'm not kidding, Castlevania Symphony of the Night. Like the others, this port got pretty well into development, but it was eventually cancelled, most likely due to the poor sales and very short lifespan of the console. This port of Symphony of the Night was thought to be lost for quite a while, until the full prototype was dumped on the site Hidden Palace in 2022 after they received a cartridge for it from an anonymous donor. Watching the gameplay for this game, I have no questions as to why this console failed and the game was cancelled. Just listen to this. This entry refers to the large number of games created by Scott Cawthon that are now lost. You most likely know, but Scott Cawthon is the guy behind the Five Nights at Freddy's series, and used to run a site called scottsgames.com. He would use the said site in order to tease the FNAF games, as well as provide some info and updates on his upcoming releases. Additionally, he used the site in order to host some of his older titles. The guy made quite a lot of games, and he used the platform to let people play them. The site was up for a good bit, but once Scott retired from making games, he eventually took down the site, leaving a ton of his early games unarchived and lost. According to a Reddit post I found, I know my researching skills know no bounds. When the site was taken down, a total of 13 of his games were lost. Considering that the post is 6 years old, between now and then, I can only manage to find one of these games that was found, but the rest appear to still be lost. What in the actual fuck is this entry? Waluigi's Toenail Clipping Party. Jesus fucking Christ. Also known as Waluigi's Foot Fault, was a flash game made by Nintendo in 2000 that was hosted on the Mario Tennis website to promote the game. This game wasn't very well known by the general public until an ad for the game was eventually discovered in a Nintendo Power magazine. Clip those nails good and be sure to aim for the jar or you'll be left with ragged clippings and toe jam all over your hard drive. Ew. Why? What sick man thought of this? At some point, the site was taken down along with the game, and nothing but an SWF file for it remains. Maybe it's for the best that this game stays lost. Please don't search for it. Welcome, Dragon Ball World, I think, refers to a now defunct Dragon Ball character creator site. The site seems to let users create their very own Dragon Ball OC and receive a randomly generated name as well as a random ability and power level. I couldn't find any footage of it, but according to an article, I found out that the site would let you use your character to fight with others in order to increase your power level. Additionally, there was a tie-in with a Japanese grapefruit drink in which bottles would contain a code that you could enter to further increase your power level. Wow, okay, pay to win much. The site seemed to be active around 2017, but I couldn't find when it was taken down. If I had to guess, probably the same year. This entry refers to the partially found original builds for TF2 that were made between 1999 and 2006. If you're not a massive TF2 fan and don't play with a pyro inflation mod, then you might not have known that TF2 was originally announced at E3 in 1999 as a game called Brotherhood of Arms and appeared to be much more similar to the first game than what we got. This early version of TF2 ended up getting delayed twice and leaving the public eye around 2000 until it returned in 2006 as a very different looking game. According to Valve, during this time period there was a total of 3 to 4 redesigns that took place before they reached the cartoony style we know now. While there's a lot of footage available for the first build, back when it was called Brotherhood of Arms, not much is known about the other builds. One of them that we do know about is the one from 2003, when the game was called Team Fortress 2 Invasion. This version was less realistic than the first, but not as much as the last, and contained a sci-fi steampunk aesthetic where the game would feature a war against humans and aliens. The concept art for this build looks fucking sweet, but honestly I'm still glad they went with the final product. Holy fucking shit. You're telling me there was a SpongeBob MMO? How in God's name did I not know this? SpongeBob SquarePants Online, or SpongeBob Town, that's also what I call my basement, was an online MMO made by Blue Arc Global with Nickelodeon. This game was in development from 2011 with a planned release date of 2013. Sometime in 2012, the game underwent a technical test allowing some users to play, but after it ended, the entire game was wiped from existence. No. As the devs and the publisher of the game gave no statements as to why it was cancelled, it's unknown what happened to it. My personal theory is that they accidentally created the best game ever made and decided it was too unfair to other companies to release it to the public. Since its execution, the game has remained completely lost, and while there has been quite a few attempts at retrieving it, none have proved fruitful. Luckily, during the technical tests, users were able to record some gameplay and take screenshots, so we do have a good idea of what the game entailed. It would have been a standard MMO where you make a character, walk around hub areas, and play games to get points. A huge aspect of the game was the racing mechanic, where players could build their own car and race around SpongeBob Town, kinda like in Mario Kart. Not only did they rob us of SpongeBob Town, but they robbed us of SpongeBob Kart. This is a cruel world. This entry refers to a cancelled third game within the Epic Mickey franchise. You may be thinking, Kappa, are you high? There is a fucking third Epic Mickey game. Well, actually, that's just a spin-off. According to the creator of the series, Warren Spector, he had originally had the goal of doing a full trilogy. In an interview, he said a few of the mechanics and ideas found in the second game were merely tests for a much larger third game, with him even considering it to be more of a musical than a game. They were quite stoked to make this, but in 2013, a year after the last Epic Mickey game, Disney decided to close down Junction Point Studios, forcing them to cancel this third entry. Over the years, a few pieces of concept art for the game have been found, meaning there may be more content for the game out there. In the year 2016, just after the release of Pokemon Sun and Moon, the gaming journalism site Eurogamer claimed that they had heard from a few separate sources that Nintendo was making another sister Pokemon game for Sun and Moon for the Switch, set to release the next year in 2017, titled Pokemon Stars. I took a look at the article claiming this, and the guy doesn't say what his sources are, which I get journalists don't do that, but the fact that this article is the only mention of this supposed game, and there's no other proof for its existence, I'm willing to bet it's a load of hoopla. Source, I made it the fuck up. It was most likely more of a prediction than anything solid. One theory is that a person saw Nintendo running Pokemon Sun and Moon on the Switch as a test, and then told Eurogamer that a new game was in the works. Either that, or it was a hoax. This entry refers to the lost early alpha build for Half-Life, version 0.61. Look at him, he doesn't have any hands. What a loser. I'm sorry if you have no hands, that was mean. This Iceberg says 0.61, but the Half-Life wiki talk about a 0.62, so I'm not sure if these are the same or not. All I could find on 0.61 was a mention of it in some Half-Life development documents that took me quite a while to find, while version 0.62 has its own entry on the Half-Life wiki, so I'll talk about that version after this one. Half-Life 0.61 appears to be another alpha build for Half-Life from 1998. Apart from this leaked document that I found discussing it, I couldn't find any material for it. There's some gameplay on YouTube that claims to be from that build, but judging by its comments, it's not. This build is lost. In regards to the other build that isn't lost, Half-Life .062 is an early alpha build for Half-Life that was developed in 1997 before Valve redesigned the game in 1998. These versions were thought to be lost as well for a while, until a disc containing the alpha was shared on Reddit and later sold on eBay for $700. This version of Half-Life was almost the same as the final, aside from some missing content and a slightly different story. In this alpha, the security soldiers and scientists found in the final release were replaced with HECU Marines and Black Ops forces. Also, G-Man was absent from the game. Cringe. Oh, hell yeah, I love this fucking game. Garage Bad Dream Adventure was a Japanese point-and-click game developed by Kintrope in 1999. In Garage, you play as a creepy CGI robot fella walking around a mysterious, rustic, mechanical world that's falling apart. These landscapes, as well as the insanely creepy-looking NPCs and the atmospheric music, make this game super fucking unsettling. When the game was released in 1999, it had a super limited release of only 3,000 copies. Due to this, anyone who wanted to play it was finding it super hard to get a copy of it, and it was considered to be lost for quite a bit. In 2013, a search for the game was conducted by 4chan and managed to find some copies for sale online, but each one was way too expensive for a 4chan user to afford. While some people online claimed to own a copy of the game, none of them offered to dump it online due to Japan's strict piracy laws. As a compromise, one of the owners recorded a full playthrough of Garage and uploaded it online. Eventually, early the next year in 2014, the user user CC0 was able to get his greasy little mitts on a copy listed on Yahoo Auctions Japan for about $700, where he immediately uploaded it online. Almost a full decade later, due to the amount of interest in the game, the devs decided to upload it onto the App Store, as well as Steam in English for the first time. If not for that, I most likely never would have played it. We ball. Terraria Otherworld was a cancelled spin-off Terraria game that was in development by Relogic, partnering with Engine Software. The spin-off was essentially Terraria, but on horse steroids, and was planned to be a different approach to Terraria, but one with new and grander ideas. First announced back in 2015, the game underwent steady development until 2017, when Relogic announced that they were ending their partnership with Engine Software and were replacing them with Pipeworks Studios in order to ensure the quality of the project. Nice, that's pretty sweet. This must mean it's pretty epic. 1 year later, in 2018, Relogic would announce that development had been cancelled. Alright, never mind. The reason for the sudden cancellation was due to the game they had made not meeting their original vision. Oof. I mean, the trailer they showed for it looks pretty freaking sweet, so I wonder what in God's name their vision looked like. While it was cancelled, a ton of concept art for it, gameplay and screenshots are still available, and they even added the music they made for it into Terraria in the 1.4 update. Apart from that, the actual build itself, shown by Relogic, remains unavailable. I'm sure they still have it though. This entry refers to a planned N64 port for the game Diablo. According to an IGN article I found from 1997, Nintendo purchased the rights to publish Diablo in Japan from Blizzard on the N64. It's unknown whether the game was going to be for the N64 or for the disk drive attachment, but my theory is that it was most likely for the disk drive, due to the fact that the PS1 port was about 300 megabytes, and N64 cartridges usually had a max size of 64. Even with the disk drive, I'm not sure it would have fit. Nintendo most likely cancelled this port due to the size limitations, or, you know, the failure of the disk drive. This entry refers to a cancelled Telltale game made for the little obscure Netflix show Stranger Things. This Telltale Stranger Things game was first pitched all the way back in 2016 after the premiere of the show's first season, but executives at Telltale thought it was kind of a dumb idea, saying the show was, quote, just a bunch of kids on bikes. I mean, technically. It wasn't until 2017 when Telltale's leadership changed. They partnered with Netflix to begin development. The game was announced in 2018 with a release date of 2019, but due to the huge amount of layoffs at Telltale and the studio shutting down, the game was cancelled. Later that year, some epic gameplay footage was leaked showing Will Byers as the main character walking around his house. It actually really sucks this was cancelled. It looked really good, but then again, so did their Game of Thrones game. 64 Wars. Goddamn, that's a lot of wars. Is an unreleased entry in the Wars series. Developed by Intelligent Systems, this series contained turn-based strategy games where the player would take control of a commanding officer and control an army in order to defeat the opposing commanding officer. Hearts of Iron, but good. This 64 Wars game, also known as Advanced Wars 64, would have been a Nintendo 64 entry in the series, with interconnectivity between Game Boy Wars 2. This game was first shown off at Space World in 1999, with a release date scheduled for the same year. However, it ended up getting cancelled suddenly for unknown reasons. Although the game didn't end up getting released, some screenshots and gameplay footage are available, but any builds that were made are lost. Paper Mario Sticker Star was an entry into the Paper Mario series that released in 2012 for the 3DS. Most people regard it as quite a downgrade compared to the earlier entries, but in my opinion, I think it's not too bad. I mean, to be fair, it is the only Paper Mario game that I've played. The game was first announced back at E3 in 2010, at the same time the 3DS was. However, the only footage we have of what they showed is a recording taken on a phone from the Cretaceous period. Aside from this footage that looks like ass, all we have is some screenshots of the prototype that was shown in a press release, and there's little information about this early build of Sticker Star. In 1999, Rare released a third-person shooter for the N64 titled Jet Force Gemini, a game where you play as an intergalactic Fed trying to stop an invasion of drones. A year later, in 2000, because the game slapped so hard, Rare hired Bit Studios to make a Game Boy Color version of the game. However, it was never actually announced and ended up getting cancelled. No. Not much was known about this port until 2017, when a video showing the intro of the game and some gameplay was uploaded to the YouTube channel Game Boy Color. What a creative name for a YouTube channel. To my knowledge, no one knows who the uploader of it is and where they got the game from, and despite a ton of comments asking them to dump it, they've remained silent for the past 8 years. LEGO Beneath the Fantasy, also known as LEGO Sea Challenge, is a cancelled LEGO Island spin-off game that was going to be developed and published by Mindscape. After the release of the first LEGO game in 1997, LEGO Island, LEGO planned to release an additional 6 games, one of which was LEGO Beneath the Fantasy. LEGO was so excited for this game to come out that they put a teaser for it in LEGO Island. According to a producer on LEGO Island, Scott Anderson, the game was going to have players drive submarines and swim around the ocean in order to stop a mischievous villain from destroying the ocean's ecosystem. Ooh, topical. Unfortunately, the game would eventually be cancelled due to a dispute between LEGO and Mindscape, leading to them losing their contract. Politics. Yeah. Also, a day before LEGO Island got released, Mindscape fired their entire team. So yeah, I don't think any more LEGO games were gonna be made anyway. Aside from the teaser for the game that was shown in LEGO Island, there's no other content available for it, and it's unknown how far it got into development. Whoa, mama. Humna, ooga, bazwing. College Terror Story was an anime dating sim released only in Japan in 1998 as a sequel to the game High School Terror Story. Why is there a high school dating sim? Oh wait, I forgot Persona 5 is a thing. The game would follow the characters from the first entry, now in college, I would hope, and would let the player continue their stories. Most likely due to a limited release, copies for the game never surfaced anywhere online, and the game was thought to be lost for good. That was until 2018 when the user Doogie uploaded the game in its entirety, making it possible for the general public to date these college students once again. Oh, thank God for that. This entry refers to a lost TV plug-and-play Shrek-themed fighting game called Shrek's Royal Riot. If you went around, back in the 2000s, stores were littered with these little plug-and-play devices that you could connect to your TV and play out of the box. They were usually themed around a certain property, such as SpongeBob. Oh boy. The games contained in these pieces of plastic would most often not be the best quality, but still serviceable for the price. One such device was Shrek's Royal Riot, which appeared to be a clone of Punch-Out, but with Shrek characters. Aside from some epic gameplay footage I found of it online, oh yeah, look at that guy. I wasn't able to find any info on it. The description of the video claims that the device was never even released and was around 90% finished before it was cancelled. The build shown in the video seems to be lost, which is very unfortunate. I would pay a lot of money to punch objects with Shrek's big muscular hands. This entry refers to the lost Sega Genesis version of the unreleased game Socks the Cat Rocks the Hill. I already covered this game back in the first tier where I made a joke about Jimmy Carter and he passed away in between videos. I just want to give a quick shout out to my boy, the Peanut President. However, this entry refers to a Sega Genesis version. While a prototype cartridge for the SNES version was found and dumped online in 2018, no prototypes of the Genesis version have been recovered, and there's barely any information out there on it. Wonder Momo Typhoon Booster, what a name, was a mobile game developed by WayForward that was a sequel to Namco's arcade game Wonder Momo from 1987. After the character Wonder Momo had quite the comeback via animation and comics from 2012 to 2014, WayForward released this mobile game as a sequel to the original in 2014 on the Google Play and App Store. However, the game was eventually taken down suddenly on both stores. Despite this, the game's sprites were able to get ripped and uploaded on Spriter's resource in 2015, and the website APK Mirrorful claimed to have a functional copy for the game, but the site is no longer available. In 2021, the user Aleph/Chizo managed to find an Android APK for the game and uploaded it to the Internet Archive. However, the iOS version still remains lost. Bowl Ed Over was an online Ed, Ed and Eddie bowling game that was released in 2003 and available to play using Power Play Games. Power Play Games was a service back in the day hosted on Cartoon Network's website that allowed users to pay a fee in order to download and play some truly epic Cartoon Network games. When it started, the service mostly consisted of already once free games that were hosted on the site, which is kind of a dick move, but after a while they started making games solely for the service, one of which being Bowl Ed Over. It was your standard bowling game with an Ed, Ed and Eddie filter slapped over it, using characters, areas and audio from the show. After Shockwave Games started to die out and Power Play Games was shut down, all of the games made for the service were lost. While some of them are still missing, others, including Bowl Ed Over, have luckily been recovered. As you might be able to guess, I don't speak Spanish. I live in fucking Queensland, so I may mispronounce this. El Laberinto de Blue was another Cartoon Network game made with Flash in 2008, the show Foster's Mansion for Imaginary Friends. The game was hosted on the Cartoon Network Latin America site until the site underwent a restructure and the game was removed in 2011. The game was meant to be a parody of the Scary Maze game, that infamous Flash game where you would complete a maze and get jump scared by the chick from The Exorcist. That game gave me nightmares for fucking months. This Flash game was exactly the same. You would be put in a maze, and when you beat it or hit a wall, you would get jump scared by Grim from Billy and Mandy. I think that's the wrong cartoon, buddy. Kind of a fucked thing for a children's game to do. Even more so that at the start of the game, it encouraged players to turn their speakers up. What is wrong with you? For a while the game was lost, and all that remained of it was some gameplay footage on YouTube. But in 2010, the users Maddie Gaming HD and Ganon the Great managed to obtain an SWF file for the game and upload it online. Pac-Man Ghost Zone was a cancelled 3D Pac-Man platformer that was in development for the PS1 by Namco Home Tech. In Pac-Man Ghost Zone, the player would take control of a kid who got sucked into a Pac-Man arcade cabinet after kicking it and saying that it sucks monkey balls, and gets turned into a horrific 90s CGI Pac-Man. The gameplay was quite similar to Mario 64, in which you would have traversed a series of unique worlds in order to get collectibles. Unfortunately, this fucking epic Pac-Man game ended up getting cancelled in 1997 after the underexperienced devs presented a prototype of it to the president of Namco, which in return, the president screamed at them and stormed out of the room. The guy was so pissed at how dog shit this game was that not only did he cancel it, he fired all the employees and shut down the studio. Fuck me, this game must have really sucked ass. Somehow, by the grace of God, some employees convinced the president, Masaya Nakamura, to allow development continue. Despite a comeback, it would end up getting cancelled again not too long after this. I guess it wasn't meant to be. After this, Namco wiped the slate clean of this abomination and turned what they had made into the game Pac-Man World. While a prototype for this game does exist and is in the hands of the PlayStation Museum, it's nowhere to be seen online, although we do have a ton of assets and gameplay footage. Jesus, what is this, like the 4th Nickelodeon MMO? They wanted to be World of Warcraft so bad, I swear. Avatar Legends of the Arena was a 3D MMO based on Avatar The Last Airbender that was made by Nickelodeon and hosted on their site in 2008. Shit, my bad. I shouldn't have been going to preschool when I was 4 years old. I should have been locked in grinding this shit out of this game. This game would let you make your own Avatar OC and fight with other players within a number of arenas using their chosen bending element. This game actually sounds like a banger, but I couldn't find much info on its cancellation. It most likely followed the path of the other MMO and Flash games on this list sometime in 2012. Despite this, I was able to find a video from 2020 of a guy running a playable build of the game on his PC. In the description, he links a Discord server containing a build for the game, so it appears to be found. This entry refers to the cancelled Sega CD port for the first Sonic game. In 1992, the Sonic team planned to bring the original Sonic the Hedgehog over to the Sega CD as a new enhanced version with better CD quality music. Footage of this port was first shown at the Summer Consumer Electronics Show back in 1992 within a showreel of upcoming games. It was spoken about later the same year in the gaming magazine Megaplay, but other than that, not another mention of the game was made, and it was completely forgotten about. It turns out, Sega decided to cancelled this version of Sonic but with better audio without telling anyone in order to move their focus onto developing Sonic CD. Wise decision. Sonic CD f***ing rocks. This was only one of 2 cancelled Sonic games for the Sega CD, with the other one being Sister Sonic, which I'll talk about further down. The evil farming game, I swear I've spoken about this before, refers to a made-up game that a Reddit user dreamt up while falling asleep watching a Vinesource clip where Joel tells a joke about an evil farming game, a Harvest Moon parody where, while tending to your farm, you have to discreetly hide and dispose of corpses. Understandably, this led to the Reddit user waking up the next day, remembering this game as the one that he actually played. Alright man, this ended up with the user making a post about some lost farming game he played and couldn't find. After a while of searching for the game, the internet managed to find the original clip of Vinesource Joel and realized that this is what the guy was talking about, and that the evil farming game never existed. Least anticlimactic lost media search. That was a joke. Lost media search is really cool. You all know the game Diddy Kong Racing, right? Well, what if instead of Diddy Kong Racing, it was Donkey Kong Racing? That's right, Buster. There wasn't one, but 2 cancelled sequels to Diddy Kong Racing, with the other one being an entry from last year, which you already know that because you've watched the video 30 times. Donkey Kong Racing, like Diddy Kong Racing Adventure, was a cancelled sequel to Diddy Kong Racing for the GameCube. This sequel was first announced during E3 in 2011. With a trailer showcasing the main concept of the game getting played, with the release date of 2002. Ah, sick. Can't wait for it to come out, but it turns out it never came out. And this trailer, along with the press release for the game, are the only 2 pieces of content we ever got. This world sucks. It's not officially known what happened to the game, but it was most likely cancelled during Microsoft's acquisition of Rare in 2002. After this, Rare would supposedly use what they had made for the game in order to develop Saberman Stampede, a game I'll be talking about later, which also got cancelled. Why? Are you fucking kidding me? They cancelled a second Simpsons game? This is the biggest tragedy since Big Bible Town. The Simpsons game was a banger 3D platformer made by EA back in 2007, where you played as each member of the Simpsons family, completing some wacky missions in Springfield and being sucked into different genres of games. I fucking loved this game so much as a kid. I had to have played it at least 10 times. It was so good, man. 4 years after its release, EA realized the world needed more Simpson game, so they supposedly began development on a sequel. The only piece of evidence for this was found on the LinkedIn pages of an EA employee at the time, Jerry Sarkis, and a freelancer, Matt Spriggans. Kinda sounds like Simpsons. On their LinkedIn, both mentioned working on a project titled Simpsons 2 Prototype. Oh yeah. However, these LinkedIn pages contained an additional piece of info. That info being that the game was cancelled due to a focus on another game. What? Oh god, why? It's also worth noting that during the time of this game's cancellation, EA announced a port of Dead Space 2 for the Wii, which was also cancelled. Is this a fucking joke to you? Other than this mention of the game, 0 content surrounding it has been found. Considering that the work listed was a Simpsons 2 prototype, it's very likely that a prototype for the game was developed. I swear on my life, I will find this thing. I need to. Fucking another Simpsons game. I swear to god, man. This entry refers to the planned sequel to the frickin' sweet game from 2003, Simpsons Hit and Run. This planned sequel never got very far into development, as the contract with the Simpsons wasn't renewed, and all the Simpsons games that were in the planning stages by Radical Entertainment were thrown into the Shadow Realm. It is quite a shame. According to the devs, they planned to make a ton of Simpsons games, as long as they were successful. We could have gotten Simpsons Hit and Run 5. Think about that shit. There's not much known about the second game in regards to the story and gameplay, and no prototype for it was made, except a scene where you could fly a blimp around. All we know is that the game would have featured this flying blimp, and also towing stuff with your car. That's about it. This entry refers to the cancelled Wii port of Dead Space 2. You know, the one EA started making after they cancelled the second Simpsons game. Like that cancelled Simpsons game, this Wii port for Dead Space 2 was discovered on the LinkedIn pages of Jerry and Matt, with Jerry being the game's QA lead and Matt being a level designer. Also, like Simpsons 2, it turns out the port was cancelled in 2011 so the team could work on other, more important things. Considering the Simpsons video game 2 had a prototype made, it's safe to say that this port did as well, but there's zero information about it online. This entry refers to another lost SpongeBob Flash game, the third out of 6 lost SpongeBob games on this list. Truly sad, I gotta say. SpongeBob Cartoon Creator was a Flash game up on Nickelodeon's website from 2008 to 2013. That was kinda like Nickelodeon 3D Movie Maker, but made in Flash. And shit, it played a lot like Go Animate, if you remember Go Animate, and would let players drag and drop SpongeBob characters onto different scenes and record them talking and moving around and shit. Like Nickelodeon Game Builder, an entry from the last tier, you would be able to create and upload your masterpiece onto Nickelodeon's site in order to share whatever abomination you had just made. The game would end up closing down in 2013, but was still playable on a separate site until that too was taken down in 2016. Fortunately, you're still able to access an archived version and make a fish avatar, but apart from that, the cartoon builder is completely lost. Back in 1990, before the Oculus Rift was made, before even the Nintendo Virtual Boy was made, the Virtuality Group made a line of arcade machines utilizing virtual reality. Goddamn, suck on that, Nintendo. These machines did what you think they'd do. Put the user in a confined space and give them a VR headset and some joysticks to wield. Of the games that could be played on these bad boys was Pac-Man VR. Pac-Man, but in virtual reality. The game let players take the role of Pac-Man and achieve their lifelong goal of aimlessly walking around a maze getting chased by 90s CGI ghosts in immersive first person. The game, released in 1996, was distributed on a CD-ROM, which would be inserted into the arcade machines. Unfortunately, kids in the 90s weren't ready for this immersive experience. Either that or it gave them severe motion sickness, and the machines performed quite poorly at arcades, leading to the ultimate demise of each and every virtuality machine. Apart from some short gameplay footage, no Pac-Man VR machines resurfaced and the game was completely lost. That was until, for some reason, the company Virtuosity Systems got the rights to Pac-Man VR in 2017, and they re-released the game for modern headsets for a whopping $100 USD. Hell yeah, capitalism, baby. Game Maker, also known as RSD Game Maker, was a collection of game development tools made for the MS-DOS released in 1991. According to DOSGames.com, this was one of the first commercially available game engines released to the general public, created by Recreational Software Designs. That's such a fucking sick name for a company. This software was sold via a direct mail service all around the world. The engine itself seems to be found, and you're able to download it yourself and boot it up, but a ton of games made using the software are still lost. The Lost Media Wiki has a gigantic list of all the games made using it that are known, and while a ton of stuff has been found, there is still so much that's lost. I think this game refers to the lost Nickelodeon MMO, The Club. I already spoke about this in another entry in the last tier for the lost Nickelodeon MMO Nicktropolis, and if you don't have the memory of a goldfish, you might recall that these two are the same game. Nicktropolis was an MMO made for Nick.com in 2007, themed around several different Nickelodeon properties. It was your standard kids MMO, letting you make a character to play mini-games and walk around, chatting to 60-year-old men, pretending to be 13. 3 years into its life, it underwent a huge update in 2010, and the game was rebranded as The Club. This rebranded version was a bit more mature than the original, and had a totally different aesthetic. It basically evolved from, say, SpongeBob to Victorious. Another 3 years later, The Club was banished into the Shadow Realm, the fate of most MMOs, but since then all the game's assets have managed to be recovered. Thanks to this, the user Time Warp Molly remade the original Nicktropolis, and it's available to play right now on GameJolt. I'm sure they're eagerly awaiting the cease and desist from Viacom. This entry refers to a planned spin-off to the Mario Kart series for the DS, titled Mario Motors. This alternate version of Mario Kart was first revealed to the public at the Reboot Develop Conference in 2018 by Yod Saito, the same guy that made the best game on the Dreamcast, Seaman, and also came up with the idea for the 3DS Street Pass because he was too shy to talk to women on the train. I like this guy. Because Saito was such close friends with Miyamoto and Iwata, the three would often meet up and discuss epic game ideas. At one of these Bilderberg meetings, Saito proposed an idea for a Mario Kart spin-off, in which the player would be able to build engines and other parts of cars by sculpting metal chunks. The other two thought the idea was pretty good and allowed Saito to give it a try, but for an unknown reason the spin-off was cancelled and never mentioned to the public until that conference in 2018. The only piece of content we have from the game looks to be a concept art of one of the cars, featuring this old guy that kinda looks like Mario's dad or something. The next entry in the tier is Parasol Club. I could find zero evidence on the internet for a game called Parasol Club, but I did find a lost game called Parasol Stars, and considering it's a Commodore 64 game, and so was the next entry, I'm guessing this is the game. Parasol Stars, the third entry in the Bubble Bobble series, that's okay, I didn't know it was a series either, was released by Taito on the NES and PC Engine in 1991. 1 year later, in 1992, the European developer Ocean Software bought the license to release Parasol Stars into the European market. European. Although almost all the home computers from the time got a port for the game, one for the Commodore 64 never popped up. In order to ensure that they could release each version at the same time, Ocean decided to dedicate each different port to a certain set of staff. This story comes from the site Games That Weren't, and seems to be true, which is quite wild. Get this, the person Ocean trusted to make the Commodore 64 version of the game was Colin Porch. While making the port, the fella had a dispute with his wife, leading to her going sicko mode, cutting up all his shirts, and destroying his shit, unfortunately including his computer and all of his floppy disks, meaning all the work for the port and its backups were destroyed due to marital unrest. Goddamn. After this fiasco, wanting to keep the situation on the down low, Ocean told the public in a magazine that some bar steward, whatever the f that's meant to mean, broke into the programmer's house and stole all of his stuff, including the code for the port. Yeah, sure thing, Buster. Somehow, by the will of the universe, a 3-month-old demo for the game managed to survive the wrath of Colin's wife, and he took it to Ocean, saying he could easily get it back to where he had it in a short amount of time. Ocean said, "Fuck it, man, we bore," and they gave up on the port, making the demo lost. This entry refers to an unconfirmed port of Super Mario Bros. For the Commodore 64. I wasn't able to find any mention online of an official Commodore 64 port, but there happens to be a fan-made one from 2019 made by the user Zero Page. It seems to be a pretty accurate and well-made version of Super Mario, but other than this, I couldn't find any info on an official port. There was a game made back in the day by Hudson Soft named Super Mario Special, which was essentially a PC port of Super Mario, but it was never released on the Commodore 64. Maybe they were planning to, but I don't know, there's no way to know. I'm sure someone in the comments will tell me what I'm missing. Sonic the Hedgehog Awakening was a Sonic game that supposedly revolved around the best Sonic character, Silver, and was in development and then cancelled around 2006. There's no evidence out there that this game ever existed, except a single listing for it on Pete Capella's website, the voice actor of Silver at the time. If this game did exist, the fact that he was credited for a voice acting role suggests that it would have been somewhat far into development. Considering that no other Sonic voice actors was credited for the game except Pete, it's most likely that the game would have revolved around Silver, which would have been fucking sick. We really need a Silver game. The theory doesn't make much sense though, because if there was going to be a Silver game, surely they would have called it Silver Awakening. If Shadow the Hedgehog got his own name in the title of his game, I'm sure my boy Silver would have as well. Considering the masterpiece that is Sonic 06 was released around this time, this credit could be referring to it, or a cancelled DLC or sequel, but hey, there's no way to know. This entry refers to the lost original version of the classic edutainment game, The Oregon Trail. In 1971, high school teachers Bill Heineman, Don Rawatish, and Pale Dillenberger decided to use the emerging technology of the 70s in order to make teaching 19th century Western expansion interesting to their students. After testing their new game out in class, they found the kids loved it. Epic. At the end of the school semester, Don would delete the game from the school's computer system and printed out the source code to take home. A few years later, in 1974, 2004. While working at the Minnesota Educational Computing Consortium, Don spent a full Thanksgiving weekend to create a more historically accurate version of the game, which is the Oregon Trail that would end up being released to schools across Minnesota. Unfortunately, neither of the three ended up releasing the original 1974 version of the game to the public, and according to Don, he doesn't have the source code for it anymore. However, in 2017, Bill Heineman stated that he still has his copy, but hasn't decided to give it to the public. Ed, Edd, and Eddy Junkyard Scramble is a rumored game in development by Crawfish Interactive that is confirmed to not exist. I'm sorry. Around 2000, the game managed to pop up online on IGN's site, as well as a listing on eBay and JJ Games. Eventually, in 2017, the user Comic Kid made a video in which he contacted an employee of the studio at the time, Cameron Shepard, who replied to him saying that he never worked on a game called Junkyard Scramble, and he was probably confused with another Ed, Edd, and Eddy game for the GPA. Jawbreakers. Both this video, as well as some posts made on the now defunct fan site dorkfest.org, suggest that the game was never a thing, and it's likely Junkyard Scramble was the working title of Ed, Edd, and Eddy Jawbreakers. If I have to say Ed, Edd, and Eddy one more time, I swear to fucking God. Resident Evil Portable refers to a planned Resident Evil PSP game that was first announced at E3 in 2009. According to an IGN interview from the time, this handheld Resident Evil wasn't a port or a remake of another game, and was a completely new Resident Evil title. The game would end up getting forgotten about though, and due to its cancellation not getting announced, it's unknown what happened to it. Very mysterious. This entry refers to the lost build of the Sonic the Hedgehog Amiga port made in 1992. According to an advertisement in the Italian magazine The Games Machine from 1991, US Gold was in the middle of developing an Amiga port for the original Sonic the Hedgehog that was set for release in June the next year. Apart from this advertisement and two others in separate magazines, there's no mention of the port anywhere else during this time. Somehow, on the site DemoZoo, a group named Wind of the Night managed to find the game on the site AmigaScene.org. However, the build they uploaded is unplayable. Despite this, they provided some sweet gameplay footage for the demo, and holy shit, I can see why they would cancel this. Split Second was a racing game made by Black Rock Studio back in 2010. It was quite the unique racing game, having the player participate in a fictional reality TV show in which they were tasked with performing 6 stunts and destroying environments, so a drunk driving simulator. Sometime after the game was released, Black Rock were known to be in development of a sequel, even leaving a little to be continued at the end of the first game. Very cheeky. Unfortunately, this second entry would be cancelled due to internal disputes at the studio causing a ton of layoffs, and ultimately the studio's closure in 2011. While we have some gameplay footage thanks to a developer uploading some, no build for it has been found. Project Velocity is another cancelled racing game that was in development by Visual Science and set to be published by Sierra Entertainment in 2005. Visual Science being the same guys behind Lemmings Paintball. Amazing game. I haven't played it, but I'm sure it's great. It's Lemmings Paintball. Lemmings playing paintball. This game wasn't known about until 2007, when someone managed to discover a game under the name Project Velocity on an Xbox debug kit, and after testing it out, the person eventually uploaded it online. Hooray! This entry refers to, I don't know man, some lost levels made in Geometry Dash, I guess. I'm not much of a Geometry Dash fan, but I'm willing to guess there's a ton of lost levels out there. I managed to find an example of this on the Lost Media Archive in regards to an abandoned Korean Geometry Dash account that has over 60 levels that are now deleted from the game servers. A few of the levels were recreated by fans by looking at screenshots, but there's still quite a few missing. We'll also be seeing a few other of these lost levels later in the Iceberg. This entry refers to the rather large number of RuneScape builds that are still lost. If you're not sure what RuneScape is, I'm sure you do, but just in case, it's a 24-year-old MMORPG that's still hugely popular today and lets players fight enemies, level up skills, and neglect your wife and children in order to sit at your computer all day and trade items on the Grand Exchange. I'm not speaking from experience or nothing. In the past 20 plus years, the game has undergone heaps of updates and changes, as you may expect from such a long-running game, and there's been a ton of these updates that are lost due to a lack of systemic backups and version control prior to the year 2012. During the lifespan of the Atari 8-bit computers produced from 1979 to 1992, a few cheeky little game companies out there were making games for these computers without the direct involvement of Atari. One of the companies that did this was AIM Software, a game studio that's known to have made a total of 56 games, with an additional 24 that are unconfirmed to exist, according to the site Atari Mania. According to the Lost Media Wiki, of these 80 games made by AIM, only 26 have been found and uploaded online, meaning there's still a whopping 54 games that are either lost or whose existence is unknown. Yikes. Mario's face refers to a tech demo made for the DS by Nintendo that was shown off at E3 in 2004 in order to show the public the power of the Nintendo DS. That's right, baby. The DS can render Mario's whole face on the bottom screen. Put that in your pipe and smoke it. In the tech demo, the user could use the stylus to grab and pull certain parts of Mario, or Wario's face. If this sounds familiar, that's because they put this exact feature into Super Mario 64 on the DS. Since being shown in 2004 at E3, the demo hasn't been seen again. What a shame. This screenshot made me exhale loudly from my nostrils. SpongeBob SquarePants Saves the Krusty Krab 3D was a 2002 game hosted on Nick.com, made using 3D Groove, a now defunct game engine that was mentioned in the last tier. There's gonna be a lot of these bad boys, I'm guessing. This game was quite simple and had you control SpongeBob walking around the Krusty Krab, picking up Krabby Patties before they could get into the hands of the dastardly, green, disgusting plankton. After 3D Groove shut down, a ton of games made using the software were lost with it, this being one of them. The game was lost like all the others until the user KoboChat uploaded a playable trial for the game in 2015, with the user Tommy Shadow later removing the time limit on it, and thank God for that. Look at this image, man. Animaniacs Hollywood Hypnotics is a 2D platformer for the Game Boy Advance that was in development by Full Fat Games and planned to be released in 2003. The game was your standard GBA platformer that followed the three, what even are they? Animaniacs, I guess, as they explore a Hollywood in which all the inhabitants have been hypnotized by Brain from Pinky and the Brain and aim to destroy the sound speakers emitting the hypnotic sounds. This was one of 2 Animaniac games in development for the GBA that was cancelled when the publisher for it, Swing Entertainment, liquidated in 2003, while the other title, Hollywood Hijinks, ended up getting a different publisher and being released under the title The Great Edgar Hunt. Hollywood Hypnotics never got released and is still lost aside from some screenshots and assets. This entry refers to the cancelled point-and-click game Bobo and Fletcher Go Deep into the Congo. What a name. This game was planned to be developed by Humongous Entertainment and by the legend himself, Ron Gilbert, the guy behind Monkey Island, as well as one of my favorite games of all time, Putt Putt Goes to the Zoo. Welcome to the zoo, zoo, with the kangaroos, God, that game is so fucking good. Bobo and Fletcher Go Deep into the Congo was planned to be the first episode of a series that was a part of a more mature line of games named Ultimate Adventure. According to a post made by Ron on the Thimbleweed Park forum in 2018, the game was going to follow a guy named Bobo who went on super wacky adventures with his super intelligent ape companion Fletcher. You see, it's funny because you'd think the ape's name would be Bobo and not Fletcher. Funny. The first episode was going to follow the two going deep into the Congo, as you might guess, in order to visit the ape's parents. In another interview with Ron, he states that the game never quite came to fruition, as the market at the time wasn't ready for an episodic format. Quite the shame. I would kill for a Humongous Entertainment game with a more mature setting. Doritos Crash Course 2 is another Xbox Live Arcade game that was released back in 2013. As mentioned in the last tier, a few games distributed using the Xbox Live Arcade were delisted throughout the years and have become lost, this being one of them. Like the first game, Doritos Crash Course 2 let players control their Xbox avatar, goddamn I miss those little fellas, and participate in a number of timed courses. Only less than 1 year after it was released, the game's servers were shut down in 2014 and the game would be delisted. However, just like that SpongeBob game from the last tier, users that installed the game before it was delisted were still able to play it. However, due to the servers being shut down, there's not much to do other than look at a loading screen. Nintendo Puzzle Collection was a Japan-exclusive GameCube game from 2003 that served as a compilation of Nintendo's best puzzle games: Dr. Mario 64, Panel de Pon, and Yoshi's Cookie. You fucking kidding me, man? No Adventures of Lolo? After it released, there were plans to release the game in both North America and Europe. Believe it or not, Nintendo, the rest of the world can complete puzzles too. But despite even showing a build of the US version at E3 in 2003, these versions never came out for an unknown reason. While the Japanese version of this compilation is easy as balls to find online, not a single build of this English version has managed to surface. Now this is epic. Back in the year 2006, Pop-Tarts began to update their website to reflect their new slogan, "Crazy Good." That's quite bold. On this new site, Pop-Tart fanatics were able to make a Crazy Good World account and play on the site to get points and redeem them for wallpapers and some sweet MP3s. The Pop-Tarts site would eventually get rebranded again in 2010, leading Crazy Good World to be lost into the void. While we can go back and see the site using the Wayback Machine, none of the games are playable as they each missing their own Flash file. According to the Lost Media Wiki, the site had hosted a total of 13 Flash games, and since the site shut down, only one of them have been found. Like with most Lost Media searches I've looked into, when a set of games become lost and only one gets found, there's likely more to come. I mean, I hope so. This site looks freaking sick. Alright, I take it back, this shit is way cooler than Pop-Tarts. If you're born in the early 2000s like me, you may recall spending all of your time in computer class playing shoddily made stickmen Flash games that were way too violent for a child to be playing. One such site that hosted these was stickdeath.com, created by Rob Lewis in 1996. Like other similar sites, stickdeath.com contained a large variety of games and animations containing stickmen doing a bunch of graphic shit. I miss the 2000s, man. Sometime between 2007 and 2009, the site was taken down, mostly due to the site's creator not wanting to pay for it anymore. While a ton of the animations on the site are still on YouTube, and a few of the games have been preserved, quite a few still remain lost. Never mind, I found a site that has all of the games on it. You can go play them right now. They're so cool. New Super Mario Bros., probably one of the first games I ever played, was a DS Mario platformer released in 2006. This game was first shown off to the public 2 years prior in E3 of 2004. My bad, I shouldn't have been a newborn learning how to speak. I should have been locked in and attending this conference. At E3, a very early build of the game was shown, depicting quite a few changes compared to the 2006 version, including HUD and environment changes. And get this, Mario was able to backflip. Like with a ton of other entries on this list, this E3 build was never given to the public and still remains lost, apart from some captured footage. But it don't stop there. There's supposedly 5 other builds that are lost as well. Don't you just love Nintendo and their preservation efforts? The builds being one from E3 2005, one from Gamescom 2005, 3 separate builds that were shown in the Japanese magazine Famitsu, and another shown at E3, the DS conference, and GDC in 2006. Now, some of these builds might be the exact same, but still, Jesus Christ. Tales of Neopia, also known as World of Neopia, was a planned MMO based on Neopets that was announced back in 2008. This Neopets MMO was set to feature an isometric world, using a mix of 2D and 3D, and would have played like a standard MMORPG, but other than that, not much is known about it because, you guessed it, the game ended up being cancelled. According to the developers, the MMO was ultimately cancelled due to interference from Viacom. What a lovely company. Considering the game was in development for 2 years, and the fact that we have some screenshots detailing some gameplay, a build for the game was most likely made, but if that's the case, it's completely lost. Humana, auga! Miss Peach World refers to an unlicensed bootleg Famicom game released in 1991 by Hacker International. The game is a ROM hack of another bootleg Famicom game called Menace Beach. Miss Peach is basically the exact same game as Menace Beach, aside from some noticeable graphical changes. For one, instead of a guy, you play as some woman wearing a skirt, presumably Princess Peach. The game also has some different looking enemies, and most noticeably, the game's cutscenes feature naked women. There's not much info out there on how this game came to be and why it came to be, but it's rumored that the game's original title was not Miss Peach World, it was Mr. Assy. Alright man, this game was super obscure for a long time and was thought to be lost, until it turned out it was just super rare, with a copy of it going for over $200. Nowadays the game is quite infamous, and a ROM for it was finally dumped online in 2017 by the user Famiac. This entry refers to a lost prototype that was made for the 1990 NES game, A Nightmare on Elm Street. I already know a little about this game thanks to the Angry Video Game Nerd. Goddamn, that video is legendary. But I had no idea that this game was made by Rare. I'm absolutely gobsmacked. How is this studio able to make something as epic as Conker's Bad Fur Day, as well as this abomination? By piecing together advertisements to the game found in Nintendo Power, it's clear that the Nightmare on Elm Street that was released is not what was originally planned. Judging by these ads, the original plan for the game was for the player to take control of Freddy himself and walk around the town slashing up teens while trying to find his bones. After being announced in 1998, LJN, the game's publisher, decided to rework the game into a different premise, delaying the game to 1990. This new premise was nowhere near as epic as the original, as in the game that was released, you play as a random teenager trying to find Freddy's bones to kill him, all the while trying to remain awake. Because the game's so fucking boring, even the main character doesn't want to be in it. No one knows for sure where this original version of the game ended up, or if it was even preserved at all. Donkey Kong no Ongaku Osobi, meaning Donkey Kong's Fun with Music, is a cancelled Famicom music game from 1983. This game was planned to feature the cast from the original Donkey Kong games, and would teach the player how to make sick beats, FL Studio, but good. It seemed to have two different modes: Music Quiz, where I guess you got quizzed on your knowledge of cooking in the studio, and Donkey Band, a mode where you were able to cook in the studio. It's unknown why Nintendo cancelled it. It looks frickin' sweet, and there's no info about the game except for some mentions and screenshots found in magazines that suggest a build was made for it. In 2013, the user Mei Lee posted on the game's page on Unseen64 saying that they had the game on their Famicom in a 4-in-1 cartridge, but they lost it when they moved. Yeah, okay man. I really hope this gets found eventually. I want to play it so goddamn bad. Sonic 16 was a cancelled Sonic game in production for the Mega Drive in 1993 that was going to be based on the Sonic Sat.AM cartoon. The game was a slower paced 2D side-scroller. It would have been pretty different from a typical Sonic game, where you'd play through environments seen within the show doing parkour and shit. According to an interview with Peter Morowake, a programmer for the game, a full prototype of the game was made and pitched to Yuji Naka, but unfortunately he declined. While we do have some gameplay footage from the prototype, the build itself remains lost. This entry refers to a cancelled mobile port of Sonic the Hedgehog 3 by Christian Whitehead and Simon Thomley, the pair that remastered and ported the first two Sonic games. Oh, and Christian also ported Sonic CD and was the lead developer for a little-known game, Sonic Mania. They uploaded a video back in 2014 in which they showcased some gameplay of the mobile port for Sonic 3 that they made to celebrate the game's 20th anniversary. It's worth noting that this demo was made completely independent from Sega and was just a proof of concept. However, some sources say that they hoped to finish it but couldn't due to the composer for the game, Brad Buxer, not wanting his work to be used. Cuck. Since then, there's been no word from either Christian or Simon on what happened to the demo they made, but I wouldn't be surprised if they still had it. Saberman Stampede was a 3D platformer in development around the mid-2000s by Rare. Oh my fucking god, not again. These fellows could not finish a project, holy shit. This cancelled platformer / racing game was planned to have you play as characters from Saberman, a series of games made for the ZX Spectrum during the 80s. The game would end up being cancelled due to Microsoft buying Rare in 2002, and afterwards it began to enter development hell as no one knew what to do with it. If you remember what I said earlier in the tier, here. They eventually morphed what they had made for the game Donkey Kong Racing into Saberman Stampede. It was basically the same game with a few different features and without the Donkey Kong IP. Thanks to interviews with Rare, the public was aware of what was happening behind the scenes, but the game never ended up getting a proper announcement as it got cancelled before it was good enough to show off at E3 in 2005. After working on it for 3 years, they realized the game wasn't really going anywhere and it sucked ass, so they gave up on it. Despite this, there's a huge amount of concept art for it that's available, and even some gameplay and music. However, the game itself is still lost. This entry refers to some partially found cut content for one of the worst games ever made by man, Superman 64. Originally, this game wasn't meant to be so bad. It was actually going to feature an open world with sandbox gameplay, but for some reason, executives from DC didn't want Superman to be able to hurt citizens and do other shit you do in sandbox games. While a prototype build featuring this original concept has been made available, it's unknown if any other builds were made and if they're still out there. But considering that Eric Kahan, the owner of Titus Interactive, says he's not allowed to talk about what was removed for the game, it's unlikely that he's gonna make the content public. Warcraft Adventures Lord of the Clans was a cancelled adventure game that was in development by Blizzard and Animation Magic in 1996. Lord of the Clans was a standard point-and-click adventure game that was set in the world of World of Warcraft. I'm not a huge fan of World of Warcraft, but that sounds amazing. The game was in development for over a year and quite a bit of work was done on it, but due to Blizzard feeling the game was lacking in the gameplay department, they decided they'd rather cancel than release something mid. The game was lost for quite a while, until a near-complete build of the game was suddenly leaked online in 2016. Since then, the user DurSilver83 has spent a total of 6 years, not full-time of course, fixing the cutscenes in the build that had broken audio, adding additional sound effects and music, adding previously missing cutscenes, fixing bugs and replacing the missing voice lines. Jesus Christ, my brother loves World of Warcraft. Rabbids Invasion, no, not the show. The 4-season-long Rabbids show is not lost, unfortunately. This entry refers to Rabbids Invasion, a Facebook game that was made by Ubisoft in 2012. This game consisted of the player invading the human world as a rabbit in order to cause chaos and destruction. Fucking dicks, rabbit bitch. A little less than a year after its release, the game would end up getting closed for an unknown reason, most likely due to it only being played by like 5 people. Like a lot of online games, no build of the game or any assets from it have resurfaced. All we have is some gameplay videos, and Ubisoft hasn't acknowledged its existence at all. The Avengers was a cancelled PS3 and Xbox 360 game that served as a tie-in for the 2012 Avengers film and was developed by THQ Australia.
Oi, g'day, mate!
This game began development before the release of the film 2 years prior in 2010, but if you're aware of the tragic fate of THQ, you can take a good guess at why this game was cancelled. At the time, THQ were going through the thick of it. After spending a ton of money on failed projects, the company ended up shutting down THQ Australia. Unfortunately for them, it wasn't until 2013 when they started to sell the game's assets, and considering that was a year after the film came out, no one decided to buy the game. Thankfully, in 2020, the site Obscure Gamers managed to acquire a hard drive containing a build for the game from an Xbox development kit and uploaded it online, and this game is first person? What the fuck? This entry refers to a now defunct website that was made in conjunction with the game Zoo Tycoon. The site supposedly contained a number of DLC animals for the first Zoo Tycoon game, as well as some cool bonus content, such as a reindeer bouncy ride. Epic. However, once the site shut down in 2012, they became lost. While the site appears to be fully accessible using the Wayback Machine, I wasn't able to see if the extra content was downloadable, as you need to have the game installed in order to get it. The Iceberg says this entry is partially found, so I'm guessing that some of its content has been found, while some is still lost. Toonstruck 2 refers to the cancelled sequel that was in development for the game Toonstruck, one of the best point-and-click adventure games ever made. The game featured your boy Christopher Lloyd in his second best role, of course, after the Oogie Loves in the Big Balloon Adventure, where he gets transported through his TV into a wacky 90s cartoon world. This right here, this is my shit. I love this shit so much, but unfortunately children in the 90s did not, and the game flopped financially. Due Due to this, the planned second part of the game ended up getting cancelled. However, quite a lot of content for the game was made, and a build for it even exists, with the game's music director, Keith Aram, saying that he's interested in releasing it. However, that was 15 years ago. Thankfully, though, in 2021, an animator that worked on the game released a shit ton of assets. Since its cancellation, the first game has become quite the cult classic within the point-and-click adventure community, and an effort to remake the second game using assets from the first one was started. However, it's currently halted. Also, for some reason, someone made a creepypasta about a guy finding a CD of the lost sequel. Hell yeah, that's fucking insane. Element 111RG is a lost level made for the game Geometry Dash. I told you there'd be a few of them. This demon level was made by the user DarkX in April of 2014 and is generally considered to be one of the hardest Geometry Dash levels ever made. Like other lost levels, this one was eventually deleted during a purge of levels by RobTop in the same year it came out, and since then not a single copy of the level has resurfaced. While the original level seems to be lost, the Geometry Dash YouTuber Stormfly managed to reconstruct it using recounts from the users that played the level before its deletion. This entry refers to a Chrome experiment called Lightsaber Escape that was made to promote The Force Awakens in 2015. If you don't know what Chrome experiments are, I don't fucking know either. It looks to be a site made by Google to host some projects that push the capabilities of web browsers. In this Chrome experiment, you're able to hook your phone up to your browser to control a lightsaber and deflect shots from stormtroopers. The game apparently didn't run the best, and certain phones meant that the game would lag super bad. Jesus Christ, you can even see it happening in the game's trailer. At some point in 2016, the collab with LucasArts and Google ended, and so did the experiment, meaning that while the page is still accessible, the game is unplayable. After the 2003 Tomb Raider game, The Angel of Darkness, came out, the publisher decided that Core Design's time with the series was over, and it wasn't just due to The Angel of Darkness. The last few entries in the series were decreasing in quality, and Eidos, their publisher, didn't want the series to die passed out in a ditch, so they gave the rights to Tomb Raider to Crystal Dynamics, the guys who made The Legacy of Kain. After doing so, Crystal managed to release Tomb Raider Legend, which, compared to the last few games, was quite the banger, critically and financially. While Crystal was working on this new title, previous developers, Core Design, continued working on a remake of the original Tomb Raider on PS1 called Tomb Raider Anniversary, planned to release on the PSP. Core Design would go on to develop about 60% of the game until Eidos came to them and said, "Nah, this game belongs to Crystal now." Ultimately, Core would do jack shit about this, and the game ended up getting remade by Crystal Dynamics in 2007. Imagine getting cucked by a Tomb Raider game. Since then, not a single piece of Core's original version has made its way onto the internet, and all we have is some screenshots and its trailer. This entry refers to the Blizzard Entertainment MMO named Titan that was cancelled in 2014. This new MMO was set to be Blizzard's follow-up to World of Warcraft, being a completely brand new IP. The game was first discovered back in 2007, when it leaked that Blizzard were looking for some more manpower in order to develop a new MMO. While most people thought it was another Warcraft game, Blizzard shot back saying it was something completely new and fresh, and the name for it, Titan, would eventually get leaked. The game was super secretive, and to this day, no one truly knows what it would have looked like. All we know is that it was class-based and played kind of like World of Warcraft. We do know that the game was going to be set in a futuristic Earth, where you would work a job during the daytime and fight enemies at night. As you might recall from that other cancelled Blizzard game I mentioned, Blizzard are super picky with what they release, which is what ultimately led to the cancellation of Titan. The development was spiraling out of control, as the scope was quite ambitious, so they decided to cancel it rather than spend more time trying to fix what they had. After getting cancelled in 2013, 1/10 of the developers working on it began to transition what they had made for it into what would become Overwatch. This entry could also be talking about another cancelled MMO called Titan that was based on the Halo IP. Home Improvement Power Tool Pursuit! Is a 2D platformer that was made for the Super Nintendo based on the show where Buzz Lightyear builds shit or something. Home Improvement. There's so much cool shit from the 90s you could make a game about, but in 1994, for some reason, the studio Imagineering decided to make one based off the sitcom Home Improvement, and holy fuck is this game bizarre. The game follows the main character, Tim the Toolman Taylor, as he makes his way through surreal looking levels, fighting monsters with power tools, and has little to do with the show, I think. I mean, it could be about Tim Allen shooting monsters with a flamethrower, but I don't know, I haven't seen it. In the year before its release, at the 1993 Consumer Electronics Show, the game's publisher, Absolute Entertainment, announced that the Sega Genesis port for the game was in development, but it would never end up getting released, most likely due to the poor sales of the SNES version. Thanks to a screenshot of some gameplay, we know a build for it was developed, but since its cancellation, it hasn't managed to resurface. Holy shit. They were making a third-person shooter based on Gremlins. Now this is why I make these videos, man. Gremlins, also known as Gremlins Revenge or Gremlins Stripe vs Gizmo, was a shooter in development for the PS2 and GameCube by ISP in the early 2000s. The game was planned to be a squad-based third-person shooter, Jesus Christ, where you would command a group of gremlins in order to fight a new gremlin named Stripe. This epic masterpiece was first announced back in 2003, with the plan to only release it in Europe. You Americans couldn't handle CGI Gizmo, I guess. Considering that it's on this iceberg, the game ended up getting cancelled and never releasing, and the exact reason for this is unknown. Some speculate that they ran out of money, or that it was lost when ISP merged with Hip Games in 2004, but there's no way to know. While no build for the game has managed to be found, we do have some screenshots, and even the opening cutscene from the game. Oh my god, it looks so sick. This entry refers to the previously lost early alpha build for Halo 3, also known as the Pimps at Sea build. Nice. This whole Pimps at Sea naming convention comes from a yearly April Fool's joke done by Bungie starting back in 2001. In 2001, they announced a game for the Xbox titled Pimps at Sea, an obvious April Fool's joke about a game featuring seafaring pimps sailing the seas and plundering people. I can't believe they would joke about something like this. This game looks so fucking sweet, holy shit. They even announced an Xbox Live headset with the game and a pimp wheel controller. Over the following years, Bungie would keep leaning into the joke, giving fake development updates for it, with them going as far to announce a tie-in movie for the game called Pimps at Sea Avast Me Bitches. I don't want to live in a world where that doesn't exist. Eventually, in 2006, fans would start to notice when looking at the Xbox Live status of Bungie employees that they were playing a game called Pimps at Sea Alpha. This was heavily speculated to be a cover name for an early Halo 3 alpha build, which would later get confirmed to be the case by Bungie, which is where the name for this build comes from. This Pimps at Sea build wasn't available for quite a while, and all we had from it was a single screenshot, until the build eventually ended up appearing online sometime in 2022, and unfortunately it doesn't contain any Pimps at Sea. This entry refers to the 2005 build made for the game Spore that was first shown off at GDC in 2005. This demo for the game was super impressive for the time and completely blew people away with what it could do. This build for the game wasn't really a beta version, as it was essentially a completely different game. Compared to the version we ended up getting that was gutted by EA, this 2005 version contained a ton of additional features and overall had a more realistic tone that ended up getting changed in order to widen the demographic for the game and market it towards children. I can't believe it, man. They removed blood and animals banging from the game. Since then, this version of the game hasn't managed to make its way to the public. Some claim it wasn't even much of a game at all, with most of the events that were shown in the demo being scripted. Daybreakers was a cancelled first-person RPG in development by Trilogy Studios in 2006, set to release episodically. Trilogy Studios, a company consisting of a ton of industry veterans from the likes of Rockstar and EA, planned to make a first-person game where you would travel to different periods in time in order to find a way to save a world falling apart from war and disease. The first episode of the series was set to release in 2008, however the year passed and no mention of the release was made. Due to the game being cancelled for an unknown reason. Unfortunately, Trilogy Studios would end up disbanding 2 years later in 2010 without having made any games. Thanks to some gameplay footage for the game found in 2022, it's clear that a build for the game was made and quite a lot of work for it was done. However, none of said work has managed to resurface online. Axeman was a musical rail shooter that was in development by Popworks Studios back in 2011. The game would consist of controlling a rad dude holding an electric guitar, walking down the street, catcalling women to join his crew, and taking out enemies with the power of middle-aged dad music. Also, the game was an advertisement for Axe body spray. I can't even make a joke about that, it speaks for itself. While the Xbox 360 and PS3 versions ended up getting cancelled and are lost, they did make an Android version, which looks like it sucks ass compared to the console version. Snoopy Flying Ace is another lost Xbox Live Arcade game that was made in 2010 by SmartBob Interactive, now called WildWorks, the people who made Animal Jam. Announced in 2008 and released in 2010, Snoopy Flying Ace had you play as the dog Snoopy from the Peanuts, flying an aeroplane in foreign territory and bombing the enemies of the United States. Nah, just kidding, you would fight a flying circus. Due to licensing issues, the game ended up getting delisted from the Xbox marketplace in 2016, making it unavailable to download. Thankfully, the Internet Archive user, Lost Scandinavian Media, managed to find an Xbox with the game still downloaded and uploaded it in full online. This entry refers to the lost development build of Kirby Air Ride. Christ, that's my third time mentioning this game. Kirby Air Ride, a Kirby racing game, was released back in 2003 on the GameCube. However, as I spoke about in the last tier, development for the game actually began way back in 1995 for the N64. At Space World in 1995, Nintendo showed a build of the game back when it was still called Kirby Bowl 64, an entry from the last tier. The next year, in 1996, when the game was changed to Kirby's Air Ride, they showed a build of this new version when it was still in early development. While this version they showed was a lot more Kirby Air Ride for the GameCube and less Kirby Bowl for the N64, it still had quite a lot of differences compared to its final release. Not only was this build developed for the Nintendo 64 and not the GameCube, it was also more of a light racing game, with it having adventure game mechanics and even appearing to be open world. While we still have the footage shown of the build itself remains lost and not much material surrounding it has been discovered. Dragon Ball Z Butchie Giddy Match is another lost Dragon Ball game made for mobile in 2018. This game seems to have been a rather simple web-based gacha game where it would encourage you to spend all of your child support money as well as gain credit card debt in order to buy and open card packs containing Dragon Ball Z characters. Using these cards, you were able to battle players online in what looks like a very simple one-on-one card duel. Unfortunately, due to the game not earning enough gacha money, the game ended up closing down in March of 2020, rendering it unplayable. Despite this, during the time it was running, it gained quite a large following due to the huge amount of people that love Dragon Ball and own a mobile phone. Unfortunately for these devoted Butchie Giddy Match fans, the game still remains lost, and all we have is some leftover gameplay footage. This entry refers to the planned tie-in game for the cancelled movie Justice League Mortal. Justice League Mortal was a Justice League film in the works by one of the best directors of all time, George Miller. I'm not just saying that because he's Australian. Fury Road is one of the best movies ever made. Also Happy Feet. This movie began production in 2007 and was set to serve as the first entry in a DC cinematic universe. That's right, bitch. DC almost made one before Marvel. God damn, they fumbled with this. Due to the writer strike, the movie would end up getting delayed, and when they started filming in Australia, our government was super greedy, as usual, and said they didn't have enough actors in it that were Australian, even though the main character was. It didn't matter though, because eventually Warner Bros. Canned the movie so that it wouldn't take away attention from The Dark Knight. God fucking damn it, this would have been so much better than whatever the fuck we have now. Eventually, on the now defunct portfolio of the artist Jonathan Gwynn, it was discovered that a third-person brawler was in development to coincide with the movie. According to John, the game was worked on for a total of 2 years before it was cancelled, so it's very likely that a build for it exists. Aside from some screenshots of the game provided by John in the same portfolio and on his ArtStation account, no other pieces of content from the game have been discovered. Gotham by Gaslight refers to a pitched game by Day One Studios based on the DC Elseworlds comic of the same name. In case you're not freakishly obsessed with Batman, like myself, Gotham by Gaslight was a one-shot comic made in 1989 that takes place in an 1889 Gotham, where a steampunk Victorian Batman tracks down and stops Jack the Ripper. This comic is quite the banger and managed to gain quite a lot of fans, so much so that in 2018, Adult Swim made an animated film based on it. Day One Studios, the guys behind the Fear games, pitched a game based on the comic in 2009 that seemed to essentially be an Arkham game, but Victorian. Fucking sweet. Unfortunately though, the game's would-be publisher, THQ, was unable to get the Batman license needed to make the game from Warner Bros. Due to the previously mentioned financial struggles of THQ during this time. This was most likely because it was way out of the budget for them. Either that or Warner Bros. Thought the idea sucked ass, which there's no way. Thankfully, 2 minutes of footage from the prototype that was made is available, and holy shit, those cloth physics. I think this is where all of THQ's money went. This cape was the source of all of THQ's financial struggles. Entry number 220, and the last entry of Tier 2, is the cancelled The Blob game, made for the DS. Planned to release in 2008, this The Blob DS game was in development by Helixi, the same people that made the Cars DS game. I played that game so much as a kid, and it fucking sucks. Fun fact, Helix, or Helixe, I don't know how to say it, was owned by a company known for shutting down studios in 2008. Can you guess who it was? I mean, I hope you can. I just spoke about them. It's THQ. They strike again. I swear, half the cancelled games on this iceberg are from THQ and Rare. These guys have such a high KD. Goddamn, man. Anyway, this DS version of The Blob, a Splatoon-like game where you play as a blob guy, giving color to a black and white authoritarian world, was set to release around the same time as the Wii version, but was ultimately cancelled due to the shutdown of Helix. Before cancellation, they managed to make a build for the game that ended up becoming lost. I mean, duh, it's on this iceberg. Thankfully, in 2023, Rebel Taxi himself managed to find the lost DS game and upload it online. That's right, bitch. We're ending this tier on a high note. Ugh, my throat hurts. That's it for the second tier, my friends. But don't worry, there's still 6 more to go, with each one being longer than the last. You're lucky that I find this fun. If you made it to the end, I want to give you a huge thank you for watching. I really appreciate it. If you want to see more, make sure to like, subscribe, and all that good stuff. It truly helps me out more than you know. I want to give a huge shout out and thank you to my Patreon members, Mrs. Mayo, Gage Mendon, Too Funny Too Cool, and Bunny Walk. Thank you so much for your support. Also, don't forget to join my Discord. You get a very sick role if you're one of the first 100 members, and there's only 20 spots left, so don't miss out, Buster. Thank you all for watching my stuff, and until next time, I'm Kappa Dance, and I have severe back pain.